Like, yeah, next time, Greg Elliott, Greg down. One of the black kids holding a classic here, it's not much. Next Steve back. Good morning. Sorry for the people still in line, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. We got a full agenda and we got a full day, and we've got the next of the last concerts tonight, which is we'll hear more about a bit. We're really pleased to have our distinguished guest, Representative Dean Phillips, with us this morning. He's been getting some special attention lately, so we look forward to hearing from Dean as he reflects on what's going on of matters that are important to in the Congress and in our state and in his personal life. So with that, we'll get started. Dan Nahr is here. Dan, pledge and inspiration.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the Republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everybody. I really hate public speaking. I don't know if you know that or not. How many of you grew up with having rice pudding for a meal or a dessert in your family? Raise your hand. I thought it was, to me, it was always a Scandinavian thing where mom and dad would serve rice pudding and they would call it dessert. And I always struggled with calling it dessert. And it's like, if I want dessert, I want candy, I want ice cream, I want something that's really good. And I don't want something like rice with sugar and cinnamon on top. But all that to say is today is actually National Rice Pudding Day. And there's been a rumor that eating rice pudding doesn't make you live longer. Maybe it does. Did you know that the Romans used rice pudding as medicine? How did that work for them? They lost the empire. I think it's fair to guess that rice pudding is not the miracle drug that we always thought it was. It was healthy and nutritious for us. So say no to rice pudding and don't eat it. It will not make you eternal or rock hard. Happy Rice Pudding Day. All right, I would forget before we pass it. I just live this every day, so I just forget it. Thanks, say and do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Could I have Greg Reinhardt and Ann Hicks come up, please? Are they here? Greg? Is Greg, Ann here? Okay. I'd formally induct a new member. Welcome. Greg, welcome to the Excelsior Morning Rotary Club. Rotary is a global network of 1.4 million neighbors, friends, leaders, and problem solvers who see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities and in ourselves. Using the four-way test as our guide, we provide service to others, promote integrity, advance world understanding, and build goodwill. You're joining a strong club that was established in 1996. Our members have a special camaraderie. Our friendships are based on trust, and we work together to achieve common goals while having fun. Our hope is that you will engage in our club with a can-do attitude as we work together to enrich our local and global communities by making a meaningful impact in people's lives. Welcome, Greg. Thank you, sir. Then I'll have Scott and Maggie come up for a concert update.
Hi, good morning, everybody. We have a beautiful day today. 2 weeks ago, we had 95 degrees, and in spite of that, all of you came out and helped out, as you always do. This evening, we're looking for good weather, partly cloudy. We're looking at concert time. Could be a passing scattered shower here and there, but nothing that's going to cancel anything. So don't bother calling anybody. The show will go on. Okay. I think we're doing pretty well on volunteers, right?
Yeah, so we just need 2 more ID checkers on the second shift. We need a few more people. If you can go right after Rotary, we only have Mike Dinder signed up to put up the banners. Thank you, Mike, wherever you are. So if you have time, you can go and help at the stage. We need a few more people to do the R cups and manage those. And then Greg, our new member, took over the sign management job. Thank you. But thanks everyone, you're doing a great job.
Yeah, we're expecting a good crowd tonight. Garth Brooks tribute band, so interested to see that band and the folks that come out for that. So looking forward to this evening. Hope to see you there. Thanks.
And I missed something earlier. I'll have Mark come up and introduce our guests today.
For everybody, I don't have a guest here, so maybe just hold the applause to the end if we could. I'll try not to miss anything. If I do, I apologize. We have Representative Dean Phillips, our speaker is here. We have Hal Roberts, Joan Angelos' husband. Taylor Mills, who's with Dean Phillips' office. We got John and Sandy Hatfield, Laura's parents, or in-laws rather, Dean's parents. Katie Now, who's Brian Now's wife. Roger Nicholas is Ann Finger's husband. Rick Trennery, Maggie's husband. Joe Pagano, mayor of Minnetonka Beach. Yes, Mark Jeter. See here, Janine Muldrum is here with Lisa Wagner. Eddie Mahoney is here with Brian Larson. And Craig Olson, he's here with Matt Hueslick. Yeah, and he's the one that designed our concert t-shirt, so it comes up on that later. Let's see, and Carolyn Manhattan is here with Maggie Trennery. Connor Eklund is Tim's husband. He's here today. Paul Katzner is here with Court Queen. Maggie Ronins, another friend of Maggie Trennery's. We got Maud Dugan and Brian Dugan, Ann Finger's daughter and son-in-law. And he's also in the Chan Rotary. And so yeah, I think that's everybody. If I missed anybody, I apologize. Thanks.
Great to see so many guests here this morning, and hopefully you like what you see here and you'll come back again for another meeting sometime. I'll have Lisa Norton come up. She's going to give us an update on our foreign exchange student from Brazil, Mimi, and her arrival.
Hi there. So we have our new exchange student for this year. Her name is Mimi, as he said. We have 2 things I would love for you guys to come. One is we want to meet her at the airport. And that is Friday the 18th. And just park, come in quick down to baggage claim. I'm not sure where yet, but that's usually that's where we met since our last year. And then graciously, Catherine is having the party at her house to welcome her on the 18th. And I'm gonna send,
It's the 24th.
Yes, you're right. It is the
She
24th.
writes the 18th.
Airport is the 18th. Thank you. I'll send this around and please sign up if you want to come. It's been a blast. Last year, Sunscar had a great time. We had a great turnout and you were a lovely hostess.
Well,
So,
thank you.
all right, thank you.
So any brief past big comments this morning? I know Matt's got one. Matt, you want to come up? Bill, come on up.
I'm afraid if Pop would believe I am not a new member, I've just been on that thing all the time. But anyhow, I wasn't gonna miss Dean Phillips, and in fact, even though the club buys his breakfast, I bought it for you instead, so I've always wanted to do that for a representative. So I'm putting $20 in today, and I just appreciate this group so that there's nothing better than here, so thank you.
Morning, my name is Karen Walkowski. I was going to read some things longer, but I decided given the shortness of time, I will not do that today. But I did want to wish our oldest member of our club, Dr. Hugh Westgate, has turned yet another year older today. So, and he's still running along. So
58, you 58?
yeah, no.
Just real quickly, so as you know, we started something new this year, doing a t-shirt design contest for the concert t-shirt, which have been selling really well. And thanks to everyone who's been involved with that. Craig, our guest here is from Excelsior, and he is actually the person who designed that. And we've been trying to connect on times for him to come in and get his prize and recognition. He doesn't like a lot of recognition, so he came on the busiest Rotary morning ever. Thank you for participating. We appreciate it. And we've got a gift card here for you to Manners, and apparently his son works here, so you'll get to come and harass him. So anyway, just a quick round of applause.
Morning, Mark Larson, and again, Mike died before, so I'm gonna come back up, but my wife and I celebrated 30 years on Monday.
Wow.
Good morning again, Lady Henry. I have the pleasure of introducing Dean Phillips. I want to thank my very best friend, Maggie Romans, for the connection that got him here, and thank you so much, Dean, for coming. Dean Phillips is a father, businessman, civic leader, eternal optimist, and representative. He is our Minnesota's 3rd congressional district in Congress. But some of you might not know this, kind of a fun tidbit here, but Dean has a celebrity grandmother, dear Abby, was his grandmother. The younger generation won't know who she was, but she gave advice to people, in the newspaper. It was awesome. And then Ann Landers was his great aunt, who was dear Abby's twin sister. So little inside information there. He's a Gold Star son who lost his father, Harley, in the Vietnam War. Dean was adopted into the Phillips family when his mother Dee Dee married Eddie Phillips, who raised Dean to work hard and always share success. One thing I love about Dean is he loves our veterans and he does a great job in honoring them. So I want to welcome Dean Phillips. Come on up.
Good morning, everybody. I spent a lot of time in Maynard's over the years. A lot of late nights. I will confess, this is the earliest I've ever been to Maynard's in my entire life. It's a little bit different. I'm so grateful and humbled to be in front of all of you, and want to thank you for the invitation. And let me start by saying I love Rotarians because I think Congress should start every session with the 4-way test. And I will get to that in a moment. I thought I'd tell you a little about why I came to this work. what I'm seeing, and then probably most importantly, what I think all of us, and I mean all of us, can do to get us out of this quagmire in which we find ourselves. As Maggie mentioned, I lost my father in the Vietnam War when I was 6 months old. And my mom was 24 and widowed, and we lived in my great-grandparents' house in St. Paul for the first 2.5 years of my life. And I was adopted when I was 3 by a remarkable man, Eddie Phillips, into a great family. Dear Abby became my grandmother, and her advice to me was never to give in. So, although during Q&A, you can, by the way, during Q&A, you can ask me literally anything in the world you want, except about the one thing you all want to ask me. Because I do follow our ethics guidelines, and this is an official event. If you want to talk to me about that, you're gonna have to go to the parking lot afterwards. So with that, and I want to tell you actually about Vietnam. For my entire life, I didn't get to know my dad, but my mom found some audio tapes in a box that my father and she had exchanged during his service overseas. So I digitized them, and I get to hear his voice on my phone. It's one of the most remarkable gifts you could possibly imagine. And I always aspired to go to Vietnam and see where he fought, and particularly where he died. And this March, I finally had the chance to do that. Went to Vietnam and to the mountain where his helicopter crashed, Dragon Mountain in Pleiku. And I got to see the place, touch the dirt where he took his last breath, and one of the most remarkable experiences of my life. And there was one surviving soldier from that crash, the co-pilot, who for 30 years I'd been trying to locate, and so I wanted to give him a hug, and I never could find him. The Today Show did a little piece after my trip to Vietnam, some of you may have seen, and through a strange twist of fate, I was able to connect with him, Tom Devereaux, and went to celebrate his 80th birthday in Colorado Springs 2 weeks ago. And I finally, after 54 years, got to give him the hug that he really needed and deserved. And just a little story about perseverance. It's never too late to make amends and make somebody alleviate somebody's guilt that it carried with him for many, many years. But I was adopted into this amazing family. My father, Eddie, taught me extraordinary lessons about business, and that it shouldn't be a means to an end. That business should be about sharing as much as you can, not aggregating as much as you can with the people and communities that make it possible. Very much the spirit of the Rotary and so many of you, and what makes this state so remarkable. And I woke up the morning after the 2016 election, and I went into my daughter's bedroom. One was at college, one was at home. And I really saw some fear in her eyes for the first time in my entire life. And I don't want to get into the whole Trump thing, but I can hope that you would understand for certain people in the country that was a frightening morning for many. And I looked at her and I thought to myself, how many people in the United States over generations have been waking up with fear for different reasons, so many different reasons. And I sat at the breakfast table with Pia, my daughter, had my other daughter on FaceTime, which I'm sure many of you do have these days too for breakfast. And I promised them that I would do something. And I ended up running for Congress. And I have to tell you, it was the most fun, joyful, optimistic, and hopeful experience of my entire life. And if I'm on a singular mission right now, it is to inspire young people to participate. It is to encourage public service. And it is to demonstrate that once again, doing so doesn't have to be nasty and divisive and mean-spirited. It can actually be fun. And the spirit was everyone's invited. I wanted to listen to people, and I listened to Democrats and Republicans and independents and libertarians. I'm sure a few socialists and communists in there somewhere too. That is a joke, by the way. Well, not if you live in Minneapolis, it might not be. But I really did. I really came to recognize, and by the way, this is such a universal truth. Everybody in the world wants the same things. We want to feel safe and secure and have opportunity for ourselves and our families. Breathe clean air and drink clean water, and ensure that future generations have a fair shot. It's not rocket science. And there's a better way to do this. And when I got to Congress, I was really excited. I thought Kevin McCarthy and Nancy Pelosi would start with a ropes course and get us to trust each other and break bread and tell our life stories and get to know each other, right? Well, we had none of that. We had none of that. And it really appalled me that the most important institution of democracy in the entire world, one predicated on people trusting one another to work together, didn't even take a singular step to get us together. They put us on separate buses going to separate events. And right away, the systematic segregation from which our country suffers manifests itself in our United States Congress. And I thought to myself right then and there, if I have a mission, however long my tenure might be, if I have a mission in Congress, it is to do it differently. To simply get to know people, find the common ground, the common good in one another as it exists. But I recognize that we have institutions set up to actually prevent that. And if we're gonna do it, we gotta do it ourselves. And I did that. I joined the Problem Solvers Caucus. We're 32 Democrats, 32 Republicans that do what you're doing right now. We break bread once a week. We have lunch. We have extraordinary speakers, provocative speakers, some from the right, some from the left. Something amazing happens when Democrats and Republicans digest information together rather than separately. And we get to know each other. You can't trust people you don't know. You can't work with anybody you don't trust. And it's so simple. And some of my very best friends now are my problem solvers friends, my Republicans and Democrats. I also joined a club called the Reagan O'Neill Club. Some of you might remember when Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan would duke it out during the day and then get together and have some whiskey at night and probably do a little more than that. And we do too, a little bit more based on whiskey than on policy, but you get the point. And I discovered the most joyful truth, which is there's some wonderful people if you just simply give it a chance. And we live now in an era of what I call angertainment. Angertainment, in my estimation, would have us believe that we are more divided than we really are. And I think you know what I mean. They're making billions and billions of dollars off of us, using us as pawns, being the wedges in the greatest country in the world, and pushing people to the corners instead of together. And they are preying on our human condition, which means we focus a lot more on fear than we do on hope. And I'm really sick and tired of it. And there's nothing we can do to legislate our way out of that, or the president can lead us out of that. That's up to us to turn off the TVs, do what you're doing, get together, get to know your neighborhood and your community, and find the goodness in everybody. And not only is it possible, it's downright joyful. And that's what I'm doing in Congress. And I found the good in people. My first bill was passed. I'm actually the most bipartisan member of Congress, according to the Common Ground Committee. And my first bill was passed with Chip Roy. He's a very conservative Republican from Texas. Some of you might know him. I think Chip is probably the 433rd most bipartisan member of Congress. But I tell you the story because Chip and I are buddies. Do we agree on policy? Not all the time, but we have lively debates. We trust one another. And during COVID, when we introduced the Paycheck Protection Program, which maybe some of you in the room benefited from, it didn't work very well. And we came back from a district work period, and I was talking to Chip, and we were talking about what we heard back home. Both of us hearing the same thing from small businesses, that the program was a great notion, but wasn't working well. So we wrote a bill together, and Donald Trump signed it into law. It passed the House with only one negative vote. Thomas Massey, who works across the hall from me, so I'm still working on him. But the point is that the most bipartisan member in the 433rd out of 435 worked together to get a bill done. Now, you wouldn't have known this because do you think Fox or MSNBC or anybody would have reported the joyful truth that these two very strange bedfellows had a bill signed into law by the president? Now, also that you should know, it's pretty typical when you co-author a bill that the president invites you to the White House for the signing, you get a pen. Well, I didn't get invited, but Chip did. And Chip brought me a pen that I display on my counter in Washington, and I'll show you that if you ever come visit. But my point is this, that happens all the time. I bet you wouldn't know that I vote with Tom Emmer, Pete Stauber about 40% of the time. You'd probably think it's 99% of the time we vote against one another. A lot of what we do actually is together. The big things, of course, there's some discord and division, and it's all politically motivated and driven, but there's a lot more good going on. And if I'm able just to spread that word a little bit, maybe make a little impact, I'm doing the work I hope you sent me to Washington to do. And I do it joyfully and hopefully with good character, not always perfectly, and I make mistakes, and I own them when I do. And I think if everybody would just take it down a notch and do the four-way test a little bit more often, life would be better for all of us in Congress, in this country, and around the world. So I want you to leave a little bit more hopeful and a little bit more optimistic. and know that, there are a lot of people out there doing a lot of tough work. And we have the mayor of Minnetonka Beach right here. Let me tell you, I do not envy being a mayor or a school board member. It makes my job look easy. But I want you to all celebrate those that serve us, police officers, firefighters, school board members, city council members, people that in this day and age really are taking on a lot of weight to take care of our communities and our country. To the extent that we can all inspire people that you know, your children, grandchildren, friends and neighbors to participate, we'll do just fine. And I'll just close with that. We do have a crisis of participation. And that means that in democracy, it doesn't take care of itself. The buildings might look strong and beautiful. We might have a great history, but it's meaningless if we don't continue to populate these institutions with great people. And the only way to do that, and this is my closing ask of all of you, it's more of an invitation. Please vote in primaries. Voting in the general election is outstanding. Minnesotans do it at higher rates than just about anybody in the country. But if you want better candidates ascending to higher positions, and you're tired of going to the ballot box and wondering why we have these limited choices, that's because we are turning over the keys to democracy to the 10% on the far right, 10% on the far left, that just want purists. They want the ideology to take precedence over pragmatism. If you all, and we all start voting in primaries, that will disrupt this very, very well-oiled system, somewhat designed to prevent that outcome of decency. So that's my invitation to all of you. Please vote in primaries. See what happens when the country starts doing so. We'll then start doing a lot more celebrating and perhaps a little less complaining. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to all of you for questions. Nothing, again, is off limits except that one question, which I don't have an answer to yet. And most of all, thank you for what you're doing, how you do it. And I think Rotarians are literally the glue that keep this country and community together. So thank you.
Do you have a question?
Oh,
Me? Oh, sorry, I gotta have a ring for him as well. Go visit his office in Washington. You'll see a couple of things today. The young folks in both sides of the aisle, it's really inspiring, and I think that's another big plus for all of us.
sure, yeah, I'll talk about that. Every member of Congress has internship programs. I was an intern for Senator Leahy back in 1989. And one thing I recognized even then was every single intern in Washington then looked just like me. They looked just like me. Because who could go to Washington DC for 90 days in the summer, where one of the most expensive cities in the country, to earn no money when you come from anything but socioeconomic privilege. And the beautiful news is now, and this goes back to what the country needs, the pipeline of young people. Many of those interns will become public officials someday. And now we pay them, we help them find housing, the diversity, political diversity, geographic diversity, racial, religious diversity is astounding. And now interns actually represent the country in many ways better than the US Congress does, which is quite joyful. And one more aside on interns. I remember when I was in Washington as an intern, there was a members only elevator. So only senators could use it during votes. But if it wasn't during votes, anybody could use it. But I'd get in these elevators once in a while. And time again, senators would ask me to get off, Democrats and Republicans. And one day, the door opens, there's a senator inside the elevator. And I said, oh, sorry, sir, I'll back off. And he said, no, come on in. And he spent 10 seconds with me, that at that time felt like 3 hours. And his name was David Bourne. Now, I can't believe I remember his name. I'm sure many of you don't remember his name. He was a senator from Oklahoma, exactly. And he took 10 seconds with an 18-year-old intern to just ask me where I'm from, what I think of my job, and told me to have a great day. And if there's a huge lesson in that, it's amazing what 10 seconds of decency can do to a young person. And I'm not saying that's what brought me back to Washington, but it just goes to show about the lessons that can be taught in just a matter of seconds. So, yeah.
One of the common topics I hear people talk about is how long people are in service in that piece, like whether you're a senator or a House of Senator, whatever. What are your thoughts on terms?
So the senator for whom I interned in 1989, Senator Patrick Leahy, a wonderful man. I thought he was somewhat mature when I worked for him. And 30 years later, I'm sworn into Congress as a new representative. And one of the first people to greet me was Senator Leahy. So it made me realize right then that, by the way, age is not an issue. I mean, I work with some 80-year-olds who are as sharp and extraordinarily energetic as anybody I've ever met in my life. But I do struggle with tenure. And there's a reason why enterprises and organizations usually limit leadership to, roughly a decade or so, because it's unhealthy for a culture to become so dependent on the same people. And without turnover and opportunities for new ideas and innovative, notions, new generations, things get stale. And I believe in term limits. I've been on some bipartisan bills to establish them. I think some of my Republican colleagues want too few years. 6 years is not enough to become proficient in anything, let alone legislation, especially when it's so relationship dependent. Believe it or not, I think 18 years is a darn good number. I think the Supreme Court should have term limits. I'd like to see every president, no matter their politics, all be able to appoint a Supreme Court justice. I think then we'd have natural turnover, first in, first out. And I think 18 years is a good number because that's 3 terms in the Senate, 9 terms in the House. It sounds like a long time for probably some of you, but the fact of the matter is we have a lot of people there who've been around a lot longer than that. And I think it takes about 10 years to get really good at something, in this business at least. So I do think so. I just want to make sure we distinguish what the issue is. It's not age, it's just tenure. And in democracy, you got to have turnover. That's kind of the whole point. So I do believe in it. And I think we should start having that conversation. And let me explain why too, by the way. I've seen firsthand how differently members of Congress act, Democrats and Republicans, in their last year of service. And I don't think it's because they're just doing self-reflection on things they didn't accomplish. I think it's because they feel liberated to do what's right, what's best, and not have to think about what every single one of my colleagues thinks about 24/7, which is how do I get reelected? And that's just a simple truth. And when I see how differently they act in that last year, I recognize that anything we can do to inspire that behavior, we should be considering. Bill, and thanks for breakfast, by the way.
You're welcome. Just to follow up on that too, is that I've been thinking a lot about term limits, the same thing. But the other one that goes back to, and I can't remember who it was that originally proposed it very publicly, but Jefferson originally put the idea of representatives 2 years, then go back to your people and all that stuff. And that's been lost completely. And that's what I admire about you, that you come up and you really do spend time with your constituents. But it's amazing because I had exactly the same idea on term limits, because this 2-year term, you're just constantly dialing for dollars to do it. And and so I would think that a 4-year term would be better than keeping the 6-year term for the Senate.
Yeah, so well, let me reflect on what you said about Jefferson too. So this is such a good point about how things are different now than when the Constitution was written. Of course, during Jefferson's time, first of all, we didn't have Minnesota and we didn't have California, but if we did, it would have taken about a week to get home, and right now I'm home in an hour and 45 minutes. It's a very different dynamic. The thing I don't like that we have to run every 2 years, because you're right, in this political dynamic with this political industrial complex, you're constantly running for office, constantly raising money. But I think it's darn important for the United States to have the opportunity to reject or pull back the reins a little bit on an administration in the middle of a term. I just think it's imperative. And if we change the staggered, the 2 and 6 and 4, suddenly we wouldn't have the people's house available to be the brakes on an administration that people are objecting to. So I think that's why those 2 years are important. What I'd rather see is a comprehensive overhaul of our campaign system, especially finance. And I say this because my colleagues are spending 10,000 hours per week raising money collectively, 10,000 hours per week. I'm sure some of you have gotten some of those phone calls. I joke with people, it's actually not much of a joke, that I actually ran for Congress to actually stop those phone calls from coming to me. Now I gotta make them sometimes. But I'm the only one in Congress that takes no money from PACs, no money from lobbyists, and no money from fellow members of Congress, and nor do I give it to them, because it's all money laundering. And it's a racket, it's corrupt, it's legalized corruption, it's repulsive. It makes members of Congress focus on all the wrong things, and the worst part about it, and I think the reason that we have Trumpism, which by the way, I understand why people are devoted to him, because he wanted to drain the swamp. The fact of the matter is Democrats and Republicans are spending all their damn time with wealthy people. They're spending all their time with people who have money because that's where the fish are. So think about it. Over time, people recognize that and they feel disenfranchised, unheard. They see their jobs evaporating, plants closing, and every politician hobnobbing with people in tuxedos and boardrooms and country clubs. And it's appalling. And I don't know why we, the greatest country on earth with the most extraordinary history of democracy, don't start taking a real look at this and start rejecting this notion that money is speech, that unlimited contributions are fine. You know, it's time that we really understand what people are asking for, and it is simply fairness and access. And I don't know why that isn't the standard. So these are things I think we should be focusing more on the incentive system than anything else. And then the 2-year cycle wouldn't be as big of a problem if you ask me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm one of the young people you talk about. But unfortunately, there's been a sense of, I think, hopelessness that pervaded kind of a lot of my generation. And I've seen a lot of really capable leaders in my student government and stuff that really could make an impact as they go out older and might pursue politics and becoming a representative, but they just have no interest. They sit in the system that they would be able to make an impact on. What do we do to start fighting back against that? To start instilling the sense of hope, to keep those kinds of leaders wanting to be involved and to reinforce those ranks?
Eddie, thank you for that, because I noticed that too in my own daughters. I recognized, I had an epiphany not long ago, where I realized that they've grown up in a country not knowing decency and not knowing cooperation between the parties, not knowing the ability to work together. And it really saddened me. As a result, I spend a lot of my time in high schools. I have a youth advisory council, got an extraordinary group of interns. I spend every time a district high school comes to Washington, I clear my calendar to host them at the Capitol and take them on personal tour, because it is so important to do what you're talking about. And lo and behold, in this new Congress, the 118th, we have Maxwell Frost, who's a 25-year-old from Florida, who was elected to the United States Congress. And I point to him because not only is it possible, you know, there is something happening. And no, is running for Congress easy? No, it's not easy. The barriers to entry are absurd, mostly because of money, which is why I will go back to my contention that if we reduce that barrier to entry, you know, who wants to get on the phone 7 or 8 hours a day calling people, begging for dollars? No one, the most principled people in the country would reject that first and foremost. If we can change that, we'll make it much more likely to invite people. But what I see in young people is what you just pointed to, Eddie, a really excited, ambitious, hopeful, and innovative generation, multiple generations, that look at this industry, the political industry, as something that's grotesque. And there is a disconnect. You know, police departments are struggling to recruit new officers for the same reason, I would argue. So what do? I think exactly what I just talked about: reduce the barriers to entry, demand that young people consider public service, and make it more appealing and welcoming. And I think we're taking some steps. In fact, just this morning, I was listening to NPR on the way over. A new political action committee was just formed to recruit and finance young people to run for office, under 30-year-olds. Maxwell Frost and David Hogg, who was the anti-gun violence activist. So there is some energy behind that. And I'm hearing from a lot of young candidates all the time who want some mentorship and support. And boy, they're the first people I try to help, because I think the new generations are going to do this differently. And the faster we get there, I think the better off we're going to be. And that's, I don't have another answer. I'd love to hear from you, Eddie, offline, if you have some thoughts on how to make that easier. But part of it is just standing up and showing some energy and putting a smile on your face. It's amazing how far that will go in this day and age, especially in contrast to most of the people running for office. Yeah.
First of all, I held a party for you when you ran the first time, and I'm very proud to have you here today.
Thank you.
I've been hearing you on media outlets in the last week or so.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No, we can't go there, but you've said a couple of things about having just some choices. It seems apparent to us at this point, 15 months out from the election, that we have the same ticket. How does someone be audacious enough to step up and say, especially I lean toward your party, as you can probably tell. But how would you possibly step up? Not you personally, but how does one say, we want something different than these two candidates that, because that's what's keeping the young people away. I'm the mother of 3 of them and they're like, meh.
So it's a great question. That's my fundamental, that's my mission, by the way. This is, the spotlight is on me, but sadly, it's not on what I'm trying to scream from the rooftops, which is that people deserve and are calling for options. I come from the private sector, like many of you, and I've never encountered an issue in which competition didn't provide the answer. And that was true in business. When we introduced Belvedere vodka, there were 2 big vodka brands, Absolute and Stolichnaya. They fought each other to the bottom, and we thought, well, there's an opportunity to slip in above them. And then we got into the ice cream business and saw Ben and Jerry's and Haagen-Dazs doing the same thing, so we introduced Talenti Gelato. And now I look at Democrats and Republicans and I think to myself, do the 2 parties need competition? Damn right they need competition. We are, for the greatest country on earth that is predicated on capitalism and competition, which makes everything better, reduces the cost of goods and makes them higher quality. The same is true in politics. Democrats and Republicans need competition. Now, I would argue, I can't get into too much politics. I don't think this is the year for reasons I think you can imagine. But I think moving forward, we would be remiss if we didn't really encourage more competition inside of the 2 parties and for the 2 parties. I do think those days will come. I think young people are going to be part of this because they're demanding change. But it's not an easy system to break. But we do not tolerate duopolies in just about any other category of our economy. But we do tolerate it and promote it and protect it in politics. So I think the answer long-term is competition. There are some messy parliaments around the world, 50 parties, 30 parties. But at the end of the day, each one of those parliaments has an incentive. If they want to put together a government, they have to come to each other. In our system, we believe that the only way to succeed is to go further apart from one another and hope to get just that incremental 1 percentage point in an election. So if you just think about the incentive structure, you have a 3rd party in Congress, let's say it's only 10 people. Let's say it's only 6 people. That would be the most powerful party in the United States Congress right now because Kevin McCarthy has a 4-seat majority. It's not about a national massive movement. It's about 6 people that might be willing to take that step. And believe me, I've thought about it regularly. But the institutions do not provide rewards for renegades. And they do it with money, which all goes back to my contention that if we can change the money game, where that's not being held over your head, because that's the difference maker. You withdraw the money, you're gonna lose. You're afforded the money, you're gonna win. And if someone took on the 2 big parties, it would be the one thing that will bring Democrats and Republicans together, is preventing competition. So that's my contention. I think that's how we go about it in the long term. I think would be in the best interest of our country. And I encourage you to read George Washington's farewell address, if you haven't done that recently. He warned us about regionalism, about partisanship, and about foreign influence and disunity, really 4 things. And if we don't recognize that we have now, those 4 things have converged at this very moment, and we shouldn't heed his call, shame on us. And when he talked about factions, he was talking about political parties that he feared would be the end of this experiment in democracy. So that's how I think that's how we attack it, competition.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Don Shelby spoke to us about a year ago and reminded us about an era where there was fair and balanced reporting from the media and his frustration that it's anything but that today. Could you talk about how the media seems to drive public opinion today?
Yeah, the question of the media is a really complicated one in a country that so values freedom of the press, free speech, because as I think we all know, there's an inverse correlation between freedom and security. And if you temper one down, the other is going to go up and vice versa. And I lament the passing of the days when Walter Cronkite told us the way it was. And the next morning, we all heard the same information, and the debate stemmed from the facts. And, we had 3 options. If you didn't like Walter Cronkite, you had to turn the channel to ABC or NBC. Now we live in this era where we can't discern editorial from news reporting. You know, MSNBC does not have a newscast, right? There's not a news department, it's mostly all opinion. And so without the ability to discern what we're hearing, opinion versus news, it's no surprise that people are confused. It's no surprise in an era of misinformation, disinformation, AI, that the great challenge we're going to face is how to be critical thinkers. Every one of us in this room has been subject to misinformation, myself included. And when I discovered it, it's been pretty jarring, because I'd like to think I work as hard as anybody to ensure that I get facts from all sides and I don't make decisions until I really believe I know as much as I possibly can. We're being subject to a lot that we don't even recognize. And how we attack it is probably the biggest question of our era in a country and in a system that makes addressing it really complicated. And I do believe ultimately that more speech is the best antidote to misinformed speech. So promoting that while also reducing the misinformation is almost incompatible. And what I'd like to see, here's what I would like to see. I think in social media, I'd like to see just validated accounts, because people, we need accountability. So if we pass any regulatory frameworks or accountability for AI or social media, we need to know who put the information out there. And every one of these platforms at their own election could require validation. You know, you gotta have a driver's license to get an account so that if you post something, at the very least, we know who it came from. That doesn't limit your speech. All it does is attach your name to it. I think that would be an important step. I think cable news, I think we might consider having some little, badge that indicates either this is news or this is opinion, so that at least people can understand, what the information they're digesting is. But beyond that, we don't have many options, which I would only argue creates an opportunity for some media companies to really be the ones that we look to for truth. There are some out there, I think, that do it better than others, but it's getting harder and harder to identify them, and even the very best make mistakes because everybody's human. And the other thing is, reporters and journalists are part of the same ecosystem of recognizing that the way to become nationally renowned, the way to make more money, is to break big stories. Sometimes those stories have to be created or massaged. And they're using the same incentive system that members of Congress are using. Let's be divisive, let's be a little bit bombastic, let's be provocative. And so these incentives for prominence are really causing us problems. But that's part of the human condition, which we can't regulate. So I don't have an answer, but I just think it puts more of a burden on all of us, people with decency, to work a little bit harder to discern truth. And then when we really identify it and know it, to make sure we do our darndest to spread it to others, because there are a lot of people making a lot of money spreading mistruth. And I don't think we can attack that in a country like ours if we value the very principles on which we're established. One more question. No, see, Taylor's out. Taylor's my bad cop and I'm the good cop. I would say, come on, Taylor, let me stay a little longer. She's 17, you got 17 more events today. So one more question. Yeah.
Team Dan.
Hey, Dan, great to see you.
Great to see you as well. I just want to say thank you for taking time on Monday to come out to the ICA in partnership with JCFS and talk about some of the issues we're dealing with food insecurity. Thank you. So I appreciate your work and look forward to our conversation.
I'm great. Thank you. And thank you for your work in that area. The fact that we have people going to sleep hungry and without shelter in this country, considering our extraordinary economic resources and human resources, is something I just do ask that you all give a little thought to, and how we can come together on taking care of Americans, because there are way too many suffering. So thank you. Let me just say, express my gratitude once again. I smile because you made my day. And not every day is easy in this work, and not every day is easy in your lives. And I'm human just like all of you. And what you've given to me today is really meaningful. It filled my tank in a way that I needed filled more often. So thank you. You've given me a gift. If you're ever in Washington, you, your family, your friends, please let me know, because showing you the Capitol is one of the most joyful things I get to do. And if it just inspires maybe a handful to spread the word about public service, I will fulfill my mission. So love you all. Godspeed. Be in touch.
Well, what time does the discussion start in the parking lot?
Yeah.
It'll start after I'm gone.
Representative Phillips, thank you so much for your leadership in the community and at the federal level. And we really appreciate you taking the time to come and speak for our club today, and many thanks. And on behalf of the club, we've made a donation in your name to the Rotary Foundation at the international level. So thank you very much.
Very much.
All right.
I thought you were gonna say you made a contribution to my campaign.
All right, so let's go out and celebrate tonight, have some fun, celebrating Garth Brooks and celebrating in our community, and we'll see you tonight.